Okay, I have had a hilarious amount of problems trying to post this video, so I am taking that as a good sign that it is something, there's something important about this video. So, for those of you who do not know me, I am Meredith Hawley. I'm a lawyer, power dynamics facilitator, and best-selling author. I help employees stop sexual harassment without quitting their jobs. Hey, Rebecca. Um, I want to talk to you guys today about the concept of anti-bias-otics. So I'm taking this concept of antibiotics and how we address physical illnesses through antibiotics and applying them to how we think about our thinking errors and how we resolve discrimination. Hey. So people a lot of times tell, and like with the purpose of being a better ally, how can we show up in the workplace being an ally to people that we see struggling, even when we see discrimination, when we see harassment? How do we, as allies, how do we be there, and how do we help other people that we see struggling? How do we help ourselves? So people tell me a lot of times, discrimination just exists. It's always going to exist. There's not really much we can do about it. Things are really unfair. And I don't 100% disagree with that. I think that discrimination may always exist. And I think that that's because it's based in the human brain having thinking errors. So discrimination is like if I see somebody do really good at math and I notice that they have a yellow shirt, and then I walk forward thinking that if I wear a yellow shirt, I'm going to be good at math. They're unrelated characteristics. It's like combining two unrelated characteristics and thinking it's going to create the same result. So this is what we see with discrimination. We see somebody has a particular characteristic. They're a woman, and they are good or bad at a certain thing. And then we extrapolate that all women are good or bad at that certain thing. And they're just actually unrelated characteristics. And so what I think is that these thinking errors are like germs in our brain. And 150 years ago, we didn't know that germs existed. We didn't know that they were killing people in hospitals. We thought that it was just how things were. Right? And then we discovered that germs were killing people, and we took steps to address it. And so one of those steps is that we invented antibiotics, right? And so I think that we can do something similar related to bias, our own bias, and our own thinking errors that we've done with antibiotics. So the same way that our bodies just have bacteria and it's not a problem until it becomes a health issue, our brains have thinking errors and they're not totally a problem until you see these results that you don't like. Until you see yourself, for example, watching somebody else be discriminated against, watching discrimination happen, watching somebody even be a bully, and notice yourself not doing anything about it, right? Like this is when we know that there's a thinking error that we have that's holding us back from having the cultural health that we want to have. So how can we take the regular practices we have and that we use for dealing with germs and apply them to the germs in our brain, to the thinking errors, the bias in our brain? So when we take an antibiotic, it wipes out our entire bacterial system, right? It wipes everything out. And that's one of the things that you want to take seriously. So I want to talk to you about this one question that I ask myself when I'm dealing with potentially seeing discrimination or seeing myself hold myself back from really supporting somebody else or from showing up the way I want to in being anti-discriminatory, in being anti-bias. So the one question I ask myself is, what if what I'm believing right now is not 100% true? What if everything I'm thinking right now is not 100% true? And there's some other way I could look at this that that would be more true, that would be more empowering in this situation? It sounds kind of like a simple question, but we're making so many assumptions all the time. We have 60,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are just assumptions about what our life should be, what it needs to be, what we deserve, what other people deserve. And the thing that I notice with my clients is often they'll be in a workplace, right? And they'll observe somebody else being discriminatory, for example, saying, women aren't good at math, right? Some kind of generic statement, or just in general being inappropriate. And what I see in my clients is that often they will have so much fear and so much self-criticism that even though they disagree with the other person's statement, they're too afraid to oppose it, right? They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. And a lot of these fears sound really legitimate. But what if you're more likely, for example, to lose your job if you go along with the bias that you see in somebody else? What if you're less likely to lose your job or to have something negative happen if you stand up for what you believe in and if you question the bias that you see around you? What if it's not 100% true? So one of the things to notice about this is that a lot of times, so I'll talk to a lot of people and they will say, I was talking to somebody the other day and she was saying, well, I can't really say for sure that I've solved this problem. And I asked her to check in with how she felt when she was choosing the thought, I can't really say that I've solved this problem. And then she said, that just feels true to me. That feels honest. Why would I say I've solved this problem when I have a lot of evidence that I haven't solved this problem? And the interesting thing to notice with her was that thought she had a lot of evidence for, but it wasn't 100% true to say that she hasn't solved this problem. There's a lot of evidence that she had solved this problem. So I was talking to somebody and they were giving me this example of, they went into a hotel and they were talking to somebody, they were with a friend, and the friend said, I don't understand why people believe discrimination still exists. See, this hotel has all of these employees who are people of color. So discrimination just potentially doesn't exist because I have all this evidence that there are these people who have jobs, who are immigrants, who are people of color. And my friend was saying that's such an interesting way to look at it, because a lot of times we think that discrimination doesn't exist if we're not actively committing violence against somebody who's different than us. But really, you want to question that and say, when we're looking at this hotel, for example, they were all low-paid minimum wage or employees, right? And they were not leading the organization. And so there's also evidence that discrimination does exist in this organization when you're looking at the higher levels of things. So we want to take this, and so that's just an example to say, we're inclined to not see our bias. We have a lot of reasons to not see our bias. But if we can consistently question, what if what you're believing right now is not 100% true? What would it look like? What would you need to believe in order to create the result, the culture that you want? Would you need to believe that your voice is important? Would you need to believe that you're not going to lose your job if you stand up against discrimination? Would you need to believe that it's worth standing up to bullying even if you lose your job over it? So sometimes the shift that we're looking for is not to the opposite, right? So we get stuck in this, when we're in bias, when we're in an assumption, we get stuck believing that only the opposite is an alternative. So either discrimination doesn't exist, or we punched somebody who's a different race than us today, right? These like two extremes, but really you want to say, is it 100% true that discrimination doesn't exist? Is there any room where we want to look at where discrimination could exist, or look at where we could empower ourselves to create the culture that we want? So I just am calling this question what if it's not 100% true? What if what I'm believing right now is not 100% true? I'm calling this the anti-bias-otic, because it can let you see there are 100 other alternatives to what we're believing right now. Whatever we're thinking right now that's holding us back is what is also contributing to the culture that we have that does have discrimination, that does have harassment in it. And so we want to just make a shift to see what are our other options. What does it look like to show up as a person who's really questioned their bias and is actively anti-discrimination, actively anti-bias? All right, guys, thank you for listening. I have this other free training that is at erisresolution.com/power dynamics. If you want to go more into this work, it's always available to you. And thanks, everybody. Hey, Lexi, hey, Erin.